listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the AwardsWatch Podcast, episode 203. I'm the executive editor of the website, Ryan McQuade. Joining me today is Nicole Ackman.
So excited to be here.
And Dan Bayer.
Live long and prosper.
We are talking about our top 5 sci-fi movies in honor of The Creator that came out this weekend. And before we get into that, there was some big news. As we were recording last week, there were developments about the WGA strike. There were negotiations all last weekend. I did mention it on the podcast. I cut it out because the deal, by the time the show came out, had already been ratified, so it would have been a relic. So it's nice to say that the WGA has made a deal with the studios. They're going back to work. A lot of shows are going back to the writers' room already. A lot of television shows. Obviously, there will be a ton of spec scripts that'll be going out for films, and things will be in touch-ups, and things will be getting the ball rolling. And hopefully, this is a good sign then also too that if this was the reason these strikes happened in the first place, then also it means that potentially here in the couple of weeks, that the Screen Actors Guild and the studios will meet and hopefully come to a fair deal for them. And I believe that they are talking today on the date of the release of this podcast on Monday. So hopefully everything goes well, though it took a while and it took a couple of negotiations for the WGA to get to that point. And for the love of God, I'm just going to say this, and before I get over to Nicole and Dan's thoughts on this deal, do not listen to anyone except the Screen Actors Guild, because there is a lot of bullshit that is out there in the media that is made exactly by the studios in order to force this deal to be less than what the actors deserve, or what the writers deserve, or whoever is striking deserves. So when you're looking for information out there, don't just tweet or comment on the things that is being fed to you. Read between the lines, and also, if it's not got a statement from SAG, then none of it really matters. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Nicole, you looked at this deal. We all kind of looked at this deal. Eric really looked at this deal. He was like shocked how much the studios were kind of left in the gutter. What are your thoughts on the deal that the Writers Guild got?
I mean, I'm obviously thrilled with it. I think that they really got, significant progress on everything that they were striking for, which is amazing. I'm very excited both about sort of some of the specifics of it and what that means for the future of film and television, and also for the fact that there's a few things in it that are going to make it much more, I think, possible for a lot of writers to be writers full time and not have to be, in a writer's room, but working other jobs and that sort of thing. But I'm also very excited for what it sort of means, just that the studios had to capitulate that much to the writers, because I think that it sort of, says something good for SAG's upcoming negotiations. And I really hope that, not to be too optimistic about this, but I really hope that it has sort of shown other industries too that, there is power in unionization, there's power in collective bargaining, there's power with the actual working people, and that all of these other big companies that sort of like these studios think that they can do whatever they want. I hope that this is a warning to them as well, that, they can't survive without the actual people who do the work. So I mean, not to sound too much like a I'm gonna, go bust a monopoly or something, but I'm very excited about everything that this means, specifically, but also what it stands for in sort of the wider working world.
I totally agree. Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much like everything that Nicole said. My immediate reaction to it was like, labor, fuck yeah. I was just, it really, the AMPTP decided to fuck around and find out during this whole negotiation process. They really did. They thought that they were going to get the WGA back by just like bullying them into doing it. And that did not work because hashtag union strong, okay? Um, it made me so happy that like they may not have gotten like absolutely everything they wanted, but they got everything they wanted. The WGA did. And like, you know, I mean, like Eric said, when it happened, like AMPTP found dead in a ditch. Like they had, they got nothing. They got
Yeah.
basically nothing. They may not have given like all all the like numbers or percentages or whatever that the WGA had asked for, but like that's because like, oh, this is an actual negotiation process. It's not just you tell us what you're willing to do. No. And it wasn't until they actually came to the table and started negotiating that they found a deal. I mean, this is how it works. They tried to make it work some other way. That's not how this works.
No.
And I hope that they now go into talks with SAG with this agreement as a starting point.
Yeah.
Because that's what it should be. That's what a negotiation is.
Yeah. I mean,
And yeah, just like, fuck yeah. I just like, it made me so happy.
I think the key points were obviously early on were these writers' room mandates, and also the percentages from streaming, the numbers of streaming. I thought that was finally something that both film and television writers and creatives needed to know, especially in television, how their streaming, if just their shows are on a streaming platform, how well their shows are to justify then cancellations, to justify then loss of revenue, to justify their existence. Because if you're telling me then if I'm a writer and you're telling me we're canceling your show and I have impeccable numbers, I'm going to go to the table and I'm going to say, well, let me shop my show to whoever the hell I want then at that point, because you don't own it anymore because you don't want it. And I think that then it's also valuable in terms of, well, if my show's doing well, I want to renegotiate my contract, means more money, means more opportunities, means a writer's room, if they're part of that season or whatnot, potentially they're able to get a show. Say, I wrote this episode was the highest of this season. Let's talk about a deal. I think that it only helps creatives here. I think the other big component in the room was obviously what we're going to be talking about a lot in our top 5, which is kind of really interesting, is the AI aspect and getting essentially rid of that stupid idea from the writer's perspective. I think that SAG has an even harder fight because of not only just the AI imaging, but then the reuse of those images for perpetuity. That's something that will be a big point of contention going forward in those negotiations. And I agree with you, Dan. Like, I'm hoping that they use this then as a start, because if we're back to square one, that's a month or 2 months worth of negotiations, because SAGs, that's the talent in front. And they've made deals with behind the camera pretty much with a IATSE deal a couple of years ago, even though that could potentially be, I think, next year, or that could be on strike again. This is only a 3-year deal, but these deals get renewed or they can be extended. So, and then of course the the Directors Guild, they made their deal first, which, I mean, looks really stupid in comparison now, as to who had a better deal. But I think that I'm hopeful that SAG does not start back from square one. I'm hopefully that we're like you're saying, using this as a base point. Hopefully they kick them in the ass one more time, because the studios have really earned it by delaying films and really just putting themselves in an unnecessary hole and not giving over to these really simple asks by the actors and the writers. And I just want to also just shout out everyone that that's been in LA and New York and around the world that have been in solidarity and have been walking the lines. It was like 100 and something days of this strike, and the SAG one's still going. So that's a lot, and the commitment is really inspiring, I would say. And we also have in the country, let alone we have the auto strike going on right now too. So it's a big moment right now for the worker and the working class. And so it was very inspirational this past week to see that deal, they got what they wanted. It's almost felt like the end of a movie where you're like, holy shit, they got what they want. But that movie then ends, and then you get the script at you get the writing on it where 2 weeks later, then SAG got their deal or whatever. You know what I mean?
And now somebody can write that movie.
Yeah, and now somebody can write that movie
right,
and get paid properly for it. So
I just want to say too that I do hope that the studios themselves see the irony in the fact that the amount of money that they lost in letting the strike go on this long and not just coming to negotiations with good terms is so much more than if they had just originally agreed to the terms that the writers were asking for. And I find that very funny.
I do too.
And I hope that they're thinking about that and that they're realizing that going forward, maybe if they actually care about their profits, they should think about like what the bottom line is.
And paying their talent on both sides of the camera accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, I always think back to that story of the WGA and the writer of The Bear having to basically rent a tux and, max out credit cards to go to the WGA. And they won the award. And it's, and they're a lot of this fight is about television, because film, they meet a lot of their quotas and they get a lot more made. And it's not to say that every film is like that. I mean, independent cinema, which also shout out to the smaller studio or the smaller independent studios.
Yeah.
No one really got to talk about, because of those, those agreements, movie studios like Neon and A24, they got to continue making movies because they understand the value of these creatives and made their deal.
I don't think it's lost on anyone that, like, we say, the AMPTP and the studios, but like everyone knows and agrees that like the problem was Netflix and Hulu and Apple. It was not like
Amazon,
Paramount, and like these.
No, well, I mean,
the actual movie studios, like they were part of it, but really this was about they
weren't driving it.
Platforms, and
I think that it was part of that.
To look at this, like how they have always seen this stuff as content.
Yeah.
Pieces of data points as opposed to pieces of art made by humans. I think that hopefully this has educated them on what product it is that they're actually producing and what its value is.
So, and I also think it's so important that we got the deals with the smaller studios, because those proved that it is not cost prohibitive to pay these creatives and these people who are actually making these films, the wage that they deserve. And I think that really helped sort of bring home the fact that it's not about the fact that the studios can't afford this. If A24 and Neon can afford to pay these people, the wages that they're asking for, then Netflix certainly can, then Warner Brothers certainly can. And I think that it was really great to be able to sort of have that sticking point there. And I mean, shout out to the smaller studios truly for like being willing to go out on their own and make the deals and not just follow the lead of the larger studios, because I think that it really helped in sort of what the WGA and SAG were trying to show.
Yeah, I would also, I love you, Dan, but I'm gonna backtrack a little bit on what you're saying, because I think half of it was the streamers, but I think also the Bob Iger and the Zasloff of it all too in the negotiating room, which is Disney and Warner's. That was a
There's
big
a reason I
line.
didn't
Yeah.
mention those two.
Oh, I would. Oh, I'm
studios.
gonna mention those damn names because those were the biggest names. They were two of the three biggest names that were at the forefront of making anonymous quotes that we know then were attributed to them about the writers, you know, not like they wanted to basically squeeze them until they had no money left, or they were having to sell their houses or whatnot, or become homeless before they made a deal. So, you know, they were part of this issue. And it not only hurts with their comments like that, it not only hurts the writers in the progression of the strike, but it also hurts their own employees. It also works all the PR and the agencies and all the talent agencies that have these clients or that work with that these studios work with. They a lot of them are very fortunate that they work with the bigger companies. But for smaller companies, they were struggling because they need to be able to get out there and have their talent to promote the work, because that's their job as well. So this is a trickle down effect when a strike happens. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. A lot of people talk about, you know, how this affects the other guilds and their healthcare, and how this will affect their healthcare requirements for this year, you know, like the IATSE deals and how potentially a lot of them are having to use their pensions in order to pay for COBRA, which is a ridiculous healthcare option in this country, and that's why we should have universal healthcare. But it also means that when a new deal for IATSE happens, this needs to be a point of contention. That it needs to just be a right that you have. It's not something that has to be earned from the work that you do. And so there was a lot of that as well that sort of opens up the wound and even more discussion, I think, down the road when we find out maybe SAG's deal as well too.
I also want to say, speaking of Bob Iger, that I'm like, can somebody write me a really good deep dive article on the way that Bob Iger had so much goodwill from coming back to replace Bob Chapek because everyone hated him, and the fact that Bob Iger was seen as the person who was, you know, going to come back in and like save the Disney parks. And then he threw all of that goodwill away with the way that he acted during these strikes. And he was, you know, like he was like seen as like, oh, like Bob Iger, and now it's like, fuck you, Bob Iger. Like
it felt like
I'm fascinated.
It felt like an Arrested Development episode where where Bob Iger says, I'm going to come back and save cinema, and then Ron Howard narrates, he did not come back and save cinema.
Like, I'm fascinated by how you can have that much goodwill and just throw it away.
Well, glad that this deal has been made. On SAG, you know, hopefully. I would love nothing more than when we've done this big long segment. I would love nothing more than when this episode drops and we're recording on Sunday. I would love nothing more if tomorrow a deal was made. That would be great for back-to-back Sundays. For that to ruin this show. I would love this to be dated content.
Said about the WGA still stands.
Yeah, I know that stands. But like SAG and like their deal,
just apply it to SAG.
Oh, it could take a couple weeks, and then it happens tomorrow. But honestly, I don't care how long it takes. I want them to get the best deal possible. So but
also now is a very good time to rewatch Norma Ray.
Yeah,
just gonna say it.
No, that's true. You know, maybe
Union.
Maybe like a top 5 David Goliath sort of battles are in the future for us.
Yes.
But Rage Against the Machine and all. But we're here to talk about also our top 5 sci-fi films, and this is in inspiration of Gareth Edwards' new film, The Creator, a movie I have not seen because they did not screen it for me. Thanks. But someone did see it. Someone did review it, and that was Nicole Ackman. And
That's true.
Nicole, do you want to just give some brief thoughts on it just real quick before we get into this top five?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was not really sure what to expect from the creator because based on the trailers, I was a little iffy, but I am a Rogue One stan. I think that Rogue One is sort of one of the most innovative Star Wars movies. I think that, it really goes away. I'm not saying it's the best one, but it really goes away from the formula that the others sort of work by, which I think is fascinating. I think that it also is so fascinating because it has a very pessimistic viewpoint on things. Like it does not follow your normal sci-fi where everybody wins at the end. So that made me really interested in seeing the creator. And I got to take my sister, whose favorite movie is Rogue One, so that was good fun. But I really was surprised by the creator and how much I liked it. It is gorgeously made. It has some of the nicest looking CGI I've seen in a long time in a sci-fi film. And I think it, even though it very obviously is pulling references to a lot of older sci-fi movies, it also is one of the most original sci-fi films we've had in a long time, in the sense that it's not based on any sort of source material or coming from a franchise. It's, obviously we've had great sci-fi movies like we're going to talk about, but most of those are based in some sort of book or franchise or something like that. It also has great performances. The young child actor in particular is astounding. I also think it's one of John David Washington's best performances, actually. And Gareth Edwards really knows how to utilize him and his talent. Also, I am a Jim and Chan stan always. So it's great to see her in something. She's like low-key becoming a little bit of a sci-fi queen, and we love that for her. But I will say the one thing I feel very weird about, and especially like whenever I screened it, WGA did not have their agreement yet. And the way that it positions AI feels very strange to me. Now, it was originally conceptualized in November of 2019, and I think the conversations that we were having around AI were a little bit different then. So I can see like sort of why there's a little bit of a disconnect, but the way that it sort of is like, no, AI beings are real, they have feelings, like whatever. I'm kind of like, okay. But we still shouldn't let them write movies. But if you can sort of put all of that aside, because I do think it's not making like any, how do I put this? It's more complex than I think a lot of sci-fi movies would be making a statement about this.
Yeah.
Gareth Edwards, I think, does a really good job of sort of having this, it's not like a both ways ism, but it's showing some different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really valuable for that. But I really recommend that people go see it. I really recommend that people go see it in a theater because it looks awesome on the big screen. And I'm really excited to sort of see where it goes, see if we get something else in this franchise or if it stays this like one-off movie. Maybe he'll pull like a James Cameron and like in 10 years give us the sequel. But
oh man, yeah. 10 years? Are you kidding me? It was more like 13, and then James Cameron will take another 2 decades to just give us a trailer for this one.
Well, okay, I had to account for the fact that nobody's James Cameron.
Yeah, I was like, you're equating Gareth Edwards, Big Jim,
just in a way of like maybe all of a sudden down the road it'll be like, yeah, you remember that film?
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that one didn't make this one's not going to make $9 billion like a James Cameron.
No.
It is. I have heard a lot of mostly really positive things, and I'm kind of surprised by that. But I'm looking forward to maybe catching it up in a theater when I get some free time. But go read Nicole's review. It's up on the website. And with that, we're going to do our top 5 sci-fi movies. If you've never listened to a top 5 before, how we do it, we give our 5 to 1s. They're ranked. We've got special criteria maybe. And if we have something that's on a list, on multiple lists, we talk about it all at once there. So then we don't talk about it 3 times or 4 or 2 times or whatever. We all talk about it at once. I'll try to make it as clear as possible as to who's on first, what's on second here in terms of where it's ranked for everybody. But we try to do our best, and we'll try to be as concise as possible. I can just say the only thing that I did not put on my list for criteria, I did not put any Star Wars on my sci-fi criteria. There's always this weird juxtaposition of how much of Star Wars is actually sci-fi. There's always that question out there. And I always just skirt that issue by saying, I think Star Wars is its own thing. And I'd also like to not talk about Star Wars today if I have the chance, because I feel like even amongst friends, Star Wars is a contentious topic. But that doesn't mean that we're not talking about it, because somebody else could have it on their list. And then that forces me to talk about it, which is definitely something. Okay. Well, then we're definitely talking about Star Wars. And then everything I just said was absolute
me sitting
crap.
here, like,
with Baby Yoda ears as our background.
Yeah, I wish that everyone listening could see that I'm sitting here with like Baby Yoda as my Zoom background. I've like positioned myself so I have his ears. Yeah, we're gonna talk about Star Wars.
Okay.
But it's okay. We're all
Not
friends
long.
here.
No, we're friends.
We're all friends here.
Whatever we say can't be used
Hopefully
against
we are
us
by the
in
end of this podcast.
a nerd court of law. You know what I mean? So, okay. Dan, Nicole, do you guys have any of the other criterion or criteria? Not criterion. Criteria. Did you guys have? It's early, folks.
Yeah.
Did you guys have anything that you omitted or put it as a penalty box for yourself? I know Dan.
I
you
did
did
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Okay. I decided that for the purposes of this, superhero movies do not count as sci-fi, even though a lot of them have sci-fi elements to them.
Same.
Like shout out, because I think that, like particularly something like Captain America, the Winter Soldier has a lot of like sci-fi-y things in it. But I decided those were off the table because we've talked about superhero movies before. And I also limited myself to one movie per franchise. So like I can only have a Star Wars. I can only have a Avatar. Because otherwise
Avatar.
like I would end up with like, the same two franchises.
No, yeah.
List. So I did limit myself in that way. I also have one that I feel like some people are gonna be like, that's not a sci-fi movie, but it is, and I'm gonna make my argument for it. So get ready.
We'll be the judges of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of like anything that I could make a really good argument that other elements or styles sort of outweigh the science fiction aspects, then it's off the list. Like for me, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Her are two of my like favorite films ever. But in terms of this particular list, those two to me are more romances than they are sci-fi movies, even though they have very strong sci-fi elements. So in order to make it just easier on myself to like narrow the pool down, I had to remove those, even though I love them a whole lot. And like one like quick little shout out, because we're talking about films and therefore I cannot include shorts, but Don Hertzfeldt's World of Tomorrow would be number one on my list, actually, because that thing is brilliant.
Shout out to Kevin Lee, our contributor, who absolutely loves that as well. So yeah, no, for sure. All right, Nicole, you're number 5.
Ooh, okay, my number 5. All right, my number 5 is gonna be a maybe.
Oh, this is the one that people might argue. This is the one. Okay, here we go.
My number 5, I'm gonna stand firm by it though. My number 5 is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Frankenstein is totally sci-fi.
Yeah, Mary Shelley is the mother of sci-fi. I like to always remind people that science fiction was invented by a woman. Particularly, I like to remind Star Wars bros of that. But Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a movie that I adore. Is it a great film? No. Is it one of my favorite movies? Yes. It is the most book accurate adaptation of Frankenstein that has ever been made. It also has a wild cast. Like, this is Kenneth Branagh in his prime hotness. Helena Bonham Carter looking also, I mean, obviously amazing, because this is the movie that brought about the affair. And it also has Robert De Niro as Frankenstein's monster, which is some of the wildest casting of all time, I think. Like, the way that Kenneth Branagh was able to get De Niro to play Frankenstein's monster should like let's study that in
It's
class.
dementedly brilliant casting.
It is,
like
right? And it is, the production design in it is incredible. The costume design in it is incredible. And I also love that it very much is a sci-fi film while also being a period film, because we don't get that many of those. Like most science fiction movies are set sort of in this like vague future. And so I love to see one that is, you know, not that. And I love the book Frankenstein. So I had to include this as an, you know, an homage to the birth of sci-fi, and also because I think it's a great movie. And shout out actually, because it was Dan Baer and Josh Parham who a few years ago were like, you have got to watch this movie. You're going to be feral over it. And they were correct. They were correct. It was the highlight of the entire like quarantine pandemic for me. But yeah, so
No,
throwing a shout out to Mother Mary Shelley first, and my dad Kenneth Branagh.
no, I think it absolutely is. You know, it's the correct choice. Yeah, it makes
Thank
sense.
you.
I don't think you have to be ashamed about that one at all. You know, especially that movie, because it is about the recreation of something ahead of its time, and
Yeah.
and that story, which was, I mean, the story about how that novel was created is always, I think, one of the more fascinating
Wild.
stories of all time, and just the, you know, she's just the superior writer in that group, in that household. It's always it's always astonishing how that's always the case when there's two writers in the household, how the woman's always better. Looking at you, Noah Baumbach. But
no, I have a book copy of the original Frankenstein before Percy Shelley edited it.
Yeah.
Which is like the Percy Shelley edited version. It's the version that is published most often. So that is going to be one of my things that I read in October. I'm very excited to see Mary Shelley's full original work.
It's like a good intro also into spooky season for us to start off on this.
Exactly.
And yeah, De Niro's makeup in the movie is absolutely insane. But I just love how he's just going there. That era of De Niro, he
was fearless.
I think I mean, like that.
That was also like Cape Fear time.
Yeah, Cape Fear, counselor, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. I mean, he was like, let me just dial performances up to 11. Everybody goes through that era, and I kind of love that about it. But Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's your number 5. All right, Dan, you're number 5.
There are lots of incredible movies that have been made about time travel, but none of them are as grandly entertaining as Back to the Future.
Yeah.
And that I when I was looking at this list, I really had to like not sometimes, like, you know, you try to do it like the best sci-fi movies, or like some combination of like the ones that you just really really love and the ones that are actually the best. And for this, I just decided, what are the ones that I hold nearest and dearest to my heart, the ones that I will just rewatch forever and ever. And Back to the Future is a movie that I never get tired of. It is so much fun. Michael J. Fox, just little bundle of charisma at the center of it. And it's weird and creepy that he's his mom.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the movie absolutely realizes that, and, you know, is playing around with it a bit. And of course you have one of my favorite performances of all time as Doc Brown. Christopher Lloyd is a genius, and who never fully got his due. This, you know, I would not have been mad at an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. I think comic performances get, you know, often unfairly overlooked, and he's so brilliant. The part is perfect for him, and he turns it into an even bigger spectacle. And yeah, it's a movie where the special effects actually hold up too.
Yeah.
Because, you know, practicality of it, how everything has weight, and like you can't tell me that DeLorean isn't the fucking coolest car ever, you know? Like, wildly impractical, but who the fuck cares?
Those movies are so ingrained into me as like my childhood because they were on television all
the
time. They were on
time.
AMC
Yeah.
all the time. I really love Back to the Future. I actually really love Back to the Future 2.
It's crazy. That movie is wild.
Is a wild movie. And then I have a soft heart for Back to the Future 3 just because I think they're all the Wild West, the Clint Eastwood sort of homages. When I was growing up as a kid, I loved westerns, and so the idea of them taking this sci-fi film into the western genre was kind of cool. And this was when you could trust Robert Zemeckis to create a movie. So that's something as well, and it really is a relic of its time. But
yes, and we will not talk about the idea that the black artist who created rock and roll actually may have stolen it from a white guy who stole it from them angle. We'll
some things don't always age well in a movie, but the overall film itself is it's still fantastic, and so I love that. Nicole, you don't have it on your list, do you?
What's funny is I considered putting it on my list, and it is on my I've got a couple of honorable mentions, but then I was like, I feel like Dan's gonna say this, so I can leave it off of mine. I didn't realize until I was making my list how much I love sci-fi.
Yeah. My honorable mentions list is ridiculous. So
yeah, I made myself cut mine down because it was getting wild.
So my number 5 is a bit of a cheat. It's 2 films, but the reason why, and I'll explain here in a minute. I think that the more I watch them, I think that they're very connected, and I just talked about them a lot on a recent Director Watch episode. So I'm not going to speak too much to Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. If you want to hear a lot of my thoughts, Jay's thoughts, and Sophia's thoughts on Blade Runner 2049 specifically, but also Blade Runner, I made the argument in the case in that episode that the themes of Blade Runner connect deeply to the themes and are then explored deeply even more in Blade Runner 2049. And I think that while technically the first film on certain levels, I think the score and the cinematography is better in the Blade Runner 20 or in Blade Runner rather than in 2049. But I love Deacon's work, don't get me wrong. But I think that the ideas are more broad and less left to 600 cuts that you have to watch a Blade Runner in order to piece it all together. And they really were kind of put together step and step. They were very meticulous when they made the sequel for Blade Runner 2049 to try to stay true to that interesting franchise, I guess you can call it, because it was just this small kind of cult classic that didn't make any money, and neither did Blade Runner 2049. But they're kind of both miracle movies, is what Jay and I have sort of described them as. It's a miracle that they exist, and some really smart person allowed Denis Villeneuve and Ridley Scott to make those 2 films. And it's Ridley Scott following Alien, which is not on my list. I penalty boxed that one as well. I thought that was a little bit more horror than sci-fi for me. But yeah, I have to just give a shout out and put those as my 5 together, if that makes sense. Don't kill me, guys. That's the only one that I have 2. So technically I have 6, but yeah, Blade Runner 2049 on either list. No. Okay.
No.
That's fine. You're all wrong, but it's fine.
I do love both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, but they did not make my list.
No, it's fine. They're also vibe movies. You got to vibe with them. Number 4 for Nicole.
Yes. So, I mentioned Big Jim earlier, and I was like, "Don't worry, Big Jim, we're coming back to talk about you." And I have to say, my number 4 is Avatar. I think that Avatar is a movie that holds up shockingly well. It is a movie that the more I have watched it, the more I love it. I also think it's a great film, partially in that I think that James Cameron is the only person who understands how to utilize like 3D cinema. Like
Yes.
I saw it recently whenever they re-released it in 3D, and I hadn't seen it the first time around, and I was like, oh, this is what this technology was meant to be. So I think that's sort of a fun element of it being a sci-fi film too, is that, you know, the technology that went into making the film itself feels almost sci-fi-esque. I mean, it maybe is not that big of a surprise because when I was a little girl, Pocahontas was my favorite Disney princess movie. So of course I love Avatar. Like I also was a big Fern Gully stan. So naturally Avatar speaks to my sensibilities.
It tracks
I
so
also
much that you were a
yes,
Fern Gully stan.
right. Like yeah, that's everything you need to know about me. And I will also admit that my love for Avatar has been influenced by the fact that Pandora and Animal Kingdom and Disney World is like my favorite thing Disney's ever done. I think it is the most stunning thing. And again, the way that they are inventing new technology to be a part of that, you know, section of the theme park, I think speaks so much to, you know, sort of sci-fi and how it can give us ideas about what we can do in our actual own time. And I think that it's a really interesting story. I love a sci-fi film that is decidedly anti-capitalist, that is, I mean, every time I rewatch it, I'm like, oh damn, Big Jim really said fuck the military. Like, and I love to see it. But I think that Avatar just really, really is a fascinating thing. Again, to have come out of something very, you know, it obviously has these like comparisons that you can make, but it is very original. It's not based on anything else. It's not coming from, you know, now it's its own franchise. And I also loved Avatar Way of Water. I really went back and forth on which one I was going to say. I think that they're both great films, and I look forward to seeing where else this goes. I think that the messages of conservation and climate, you know, change and all that sort of things that are woven into it are a great example of what sci-fi can and should be.
It's not on my list. I'm on rec. It's not. I'm on
I'm not
record.
shocked.
I don't like the first. I just don't like the first Avatar, but I love The Way of Water, and
Yeah.
that was a really fantastic experience
Yeah.
last year. Just to be able to see that in 3D and in a true IMAX screen. Big Jim, no, I've turned the corner. I like Big Jim a lot. All right, and it's just this is
It's
the
one
one.
of the most surprising news
Yeah.
stories of 2022.
Yeah. Headlines, you know, but no, I if I didn't put any of his films on here, but if I mean, if I was to put something on here, I think T2 would be that one. But again, I think more of his action more than I do the sci-fi elements. So I kind of penalty boxed him for that. If we were talking about like action movies, like we have talked about in the past, Big Jim has to be on that list. Like he's probably the greatest director of action movies in the history. I mean, like go watch go watch those fight sequences at the end of Alien
Way of Wa-
and The Way of Water, and I mean T2 is an insane movie. I always think about it is going to be a list that we do. I know that's for sure. A top 5. We shouldn't have watched that movie at a young age. You know, we're going to find a time to do it and connect it maybe, or not to just do it on a week where we got nothing going on. I watched T2 way too much when I was young, and I feel like a lot of his movies you watch when you're way too young.
I
But,
watched Titanic way too young.
yeah, exactly.
I still won't get on a ship.
Exactly.
I watched The Abyss way too young.
Oh my God, The Abyss. But
That's
Dan,
a great idea for an episode, though. I just have to say we need to do that.
yeah. I'm just trying to come up with more ideas for us to do. But Dan,
Yeah.
you don't have it on your list, do you?
No, it was very, very close. Like if
Okay.
there was, it's probably me number 6 if there was one.
Okay.
I love it. I think it's a perfect piece of pop art. It just fucking works.
Yeah. So then you're number 4.
I understand that the you know what I said earlier about things that I kept off my list, but my number 4 is Alien.
Okay. There it is, yeah.
Nice.
Because it's one of those like, how do I even talk about this? Like, perfect movie is perfect.
It's a perfect movie. It is.
Like,
Top to bottom. It is a perfect movie. No, you're not wrong.
And I just it is a movie that, like, I know it's really more of a horror movie than a sci-fi movie. I get that, but so much of that world building is so incredible, and they get at it so efficiently. And we're really, so it, as much as it is just about, this alien loose on this ship, what impressed me about this movie the first time I saw it is just how brutally efficient the setup is, how we're really thrown into this world, and how much the sci-fi elements really define these characters and how they react to things. Ash is one of my favorite robots or AI or whatever you want to call it in cinema. I think he's incredible and fascinating, and like you did with 2049, like the sequel slash remake pre-make Prometheus like does a lot of the same things that this one does on a grander scale, and it has a lot of interesting ideas in it too, but it's a much less perfect movie than this.
That is a complicated that's a complicated film, but it's also very interesting to watch that movie. Like it's kind of a mess. But it's also like I can't stop staring at this mess. This is really good mess.
It's a fascinating movie, and I think they tried to do like a harder sci-fi push on that than they did on Alien, and I really like that about it. But yeah, I just love it. I love that it taps into the sort of nightmare of space and space travel. I think that's something that sci-fi actually gets at not quite often enough. The black void of space. And this is another one where like I toyed with myself with a lot, like, is Gravity a sci-fi movie? Like, yes and no. Like, I don't know. I almost put it here, but then I was like, no, because Alien is actually sci-fi.
It does have a lot of great questions that it is asking. I know I penalty boxed it, but I just did that for myself. I'm glad that you put it on your list. Nicole, it's not on your list, right? No? Okay.
And Sigourney Weaver,
incredible.
One of the great action heroines of all time.
I do love that both Dan and I, for our number 4s, had a Sigourney Weaver movie. That is important to me.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's not in my number 4.
But she probably should have been.
I was thinking about, I couldn't fit like Working Girl in here. Gorillas of the Mist. You know what I mean? It was really pushing it, I think, there.
I would love to hear your justification for that.
Yeah. I could, but I don't want to get in trouble. Because of our society and how we are fucked up. Because Harrison Ford in that movie looks out of this world incredible. There you go.
Truly.
But and how that movie didn't like win all the Oscars is fucking insane. But anyway, speaking of Oscars, movie that did win an Oscar, won Best Original Screenplay a couple of years ago, about a decade ago, is Spike Jonze's Her. And I know that, Dan, you did penalty box it, but
I'm so glad you did.
I actually think it's great that at our number 4s, Dan and I had penalty box movies that we put for ourselves. I think this movie is, I think, one of the saddest movies I've ever seen in a theater. Because I think that it's more than, I think, just a romance movie. I think it is talking about our relationship with our technology, how it kind of consumes us to the point in which then it is literally our relationship, our the only thing that we love. And then I think what's so interesting about it, and Jones is actually got like sci-fi elements really in a lot of his films. Like I think Adaptation, weirdly enough, is kind of like almost like sci-fi in the way it's kind of presented because of Kaufman's work. And obviously being John Malkovich and the way that whole film is constructed. But this one is true sci-fi because that question of what happens then when the AI becomes intelligent, it doesn't turn on us, it doesn't need us. That I think is a much more interesting question to ask rather than, oh, it's just going to kill us and take over the world. No, it's going to become smarter and then it's going to vanish. And what happens when it vanishes is really that's going to define us. And I think the movie ends on a really fascinating. Some people think it ends on a really like sour note, and I don't think that. I don't believe that at all. I think it ends on a place of potential hope and optimism. And I think Joaquin Phoenix is incredible in this film. It's actually like one of my his two favorite performances for me.
Easily my favorite performance of his. Yeah.
And you know, I'm going to say this. I'm sick and tired of like voice acting. You know, there were stupid new Golden Globe categories that were announced this week and we're not going to bring up, but if we're going to bring up like something that's like actually meaningful, like voice acting is just like a category that I think should be something to consider because it's a real art form when it's able to do it. And I think Scarlett Johansson's work here is absolutely incredible. The fact that they didn't actually communicate with one another because like Samantha Morton was originally supposed to be this voice and then they completely changed it all at the last second. I think is absolutely great. And yeah, I also just like the construction of this world too. And the way he kind of constructs and plays video games or his job and all these little things that are kind of added in there what I love about like modern sci-fi films that have been made over the last like 10 years, I think a lot of like Kogonada's After Yang last year is doing minimal things that heighten the world building without actually having to go on this grand scale. So it's just the little things that kind of fit you right into this world. So yeah, her obviously a masterpiece in my opinion, but
look, the future is pink. Okay, get over it.
I'm so glad that one of you had it on your list because it was on my like special mentions. So.
It's an incredible movie.
I love it so much.
Last week I think I went a little too like far back into the archives and this week I'm like, no, Ryan's picking modern movies that he loves too. So like, and if they're basic picks, get over it. They're like masterpieces, people. But Nicole, your number 3.
My number 3 is one of my favorite films of all time. I think that goes for everything on this list, though. But it is a movie that I think about continually, and it really, I mean, it's definitely like a dystopian film, but I think dystopia is sci-fi. Mm-hmm. And it is the least sci-fi-y of the movies on my list, I guess, but I do think it still counts, and that is the 2010 film Never Let Me Go. I love this movie. I am obsessed with the world that it creates and this whole idea of, these people being, cloned and like built to be organ donors. I think that's so like horrifying, but also interesting. Obviously this cast is something I'm obsessed with. Like literally, it's like they sat down and said, who can we get to make this Nicole's favorite movie? And the fact that not only does it have Carey Mulligan, Keira Knightley, and Andrew Garfield, but Donald Gleason is also in this movie is truly Nicole bait. But I think that it has some really gorgeous performances. I think it's still one of Andrew Garfield's best performances. I think that like this is the movie where it was like, oh, Carey Mulligan is that girl. And I love Keira Knightley in this role. It's a bit different than most of the roles that she's played. I mean, first of all, by not being a period piece. But I also think she sort of functions in this story differently than she does in most movies. And I think, most of the time she gets cast more in the role that Carey Mulligan is playing here. And I think it's so interesting to see her do something a bit different. I also have a personal attachment to it because hospital-y thing that Keira Knightley is in towards the end of the movie was actually the building next to mine at St. Andrews is where they filmed that whenever I studied abroad at the University of St. Andrews. So I watched it while at St. Andrews while living next door to that building for the first time. So that was very interesting. I was like, oh God. But I just think it's a gorgeous, gorgeous film. The way that it is grappling with ideas around, you know, advancements in medicine and human technology and things like that is really fascinating. And I think it's a really underrated movie. Like, I wish that more people had seen it, but it's also a very difficult movie to watch. It's not for the faint of heart.
It's a gem. It's an absolute
Yeah.
gem. I remember seeing it and I was kind of blown away. I think of the scene where the teacher explains to them exactly who they are, and it's a scene it's a scene that like can feel so on the damn nose, but it's actually quite devastating.
Yeah.
And their sort of fight for, you know, they're essentially, like you're saying, they're clones. They're not real. So them trying to fight for their humanity throughout it, and also while trying to exist with having love in their life it's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful novel too, if anyone's ever read it. I don't think people talk enough about it. I think it's right after An Education, so it's like bam years for Mulligan. I think Knightley's kind of subdued and incredible in it, but that was
Oscar nominee Andrea Riseborough.
That's right. And Frances Fisher's not in this movie, but no, I agree with you. Like, Garfield had like a year, because like that was that and Social Network like right around the same time. So
and two very different performances,
but he's actually very childlike and vulnerable in this, and
he's so good.
And as opposed to that Sorkin dialogue that he's like bombastic with. And so no, I love that pick. I think I didn't think about it, actually. I forgot about it a little bit, but I love that movie. So Dan, your number 3?
I'm not going to give an intro. My number 3 is Total Fucking Recall, baby.
Hell yeah. See you at the party, Richter. Go.
Paul Verhoeven is a madman, and this movie is wild. Sci-fi noir, which I love, and just Arnold going balls to the fucking wall, with the bug eyes and the screaming and the pushing, and the lady, the robot lady who's trying to go through security.
It's a wild movie. Verhoeven is not for the faint of heart. I mean, he's a wild dude. And
I love it. I love Sharon Stone's like almost cameo in it. She's great, so charismatic, and I love the like almost like Blade Runner but on a budget production design. like it has that sort of like cinder blocky, sleekness, but like it feels like a set always. Like it never quite feels
grimy.
Real.
The movie's the movie's just like
it's grimy and dirty and like low rent, like B movie, but it's so much freaking fun.
Says a lot about I think the environment they're trying to create in the world that we end up having. It's just
and the one of the most nightmarish sequences in a sci-fi film, that dream sequence on Mars when the his helmet gets broken and just starts I love this movie. It's so wild. Any time it comes up on TV, which is often, or used to be very often, wherever it is in the movie, I have to stop and watch, because I get immediately sucked in and involved. It's so much fun, and again, like the practical visual effects, makeup effects, they look so good and so real. It makes me like not want to watch another movie that has CGI ever again.
Yeah, I mean, Verhoeven has like 3 sci-fi films I consider
love Starship Troopers too. Like that was almost on this list.
RoboCop was there as well.
Yes.
RoboCop's a ridiculous movie.
RoboCop is brutal.
Yeah, it's a brutal movie. It's ridiculous. Like that's
Yeah.
and I almost considered actually Starship Troopers because I agree with Jay. Like its ideas about the military industrial complex are actually like fascinating.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant satire too.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, if you haven't seen those 3 films from Verhoeven, just pour a wine and have a night. They're wild movies, but they're the kind of inventive films that we talk about, like in the genre, that don't get made anymore. Like somebody that has a vision and is given the tools and sort of utilizes it. And it's funny, he makes a movie like Total Recall that feels very low rent, and then he makes Starship Troopers, which is like the CGI is so overabundance and over the top.
It's great.
And it's part of all of it too. It's you know, he don't make movies like that, but now he makes Benedettas, so I'm okay with that.
Very okay with that. Yeah,
I'm very okay. Like the man can move from like Elle and Benedetta to Total Recall. Like he's fascinating. So
Paul Verhoeven can do whatever the fuck he wants. You know.
My number 3 is Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men.
Yes.
I mean, it's a movie that I remember seeing, and I was just kind of mesmerized with so much of the visual language in the film, and talk about dystopian, kind of going off of Nicole. This is a movie set in the future, and it's a very bleak future because babies aren't being made, or no one can get pregnant. And Clive Owen is kind of playing this sort of grifter, and he gets attached to this gang of rebels who essentially have the humanity's hope. And I think that it's got a mid-act twist. A couple mid-act twists I did not see coming. It's got one of the greatest continuing shots in, I think, film history with that car. I think Clive Owen's incredible in this movie. I think Michael Caine, Chiwetel Ejiofor was my first time actually seeing him in a film. Julianne Moore is incredible. I think about so many images, because I think Cuarón is just the best at being able to use the visual language and evoke emotion. And I love his, something like his Harry Potter film, and I love, obviously Gravity, a movie that I put on like just the honorable mentions list, and Roma, and all of his movies, Y Tu Mamá También, they all get me, but this one always, that just that final shot of Owen in the boat, it balls me to tears. It's an incredible film. I think of the moment halfway through when they see the army and all the soldiers stop, and their face of, because you realize that they're not actually the enemy, and that it's something that can unite us, even though that there's this war essentially going on. It's a uniting point, and it's an incredible movie, and I'm waiting for the day they release it on 4K, because I think that needs, there's a lot of movies from like the 2004 to 2008 era that needs like updates, and I think this one definitely could use it. And so yeah, it's my number 3. I think you guys have it,
an
right?
Incredible movie, but no, it would be in my top 10 but not my top 5.
Yeah. Definitely also like a very bleak movie, but also bleak with hope, a little bit of dash of hope. Nicole,
and also Michael Caine in this movie.
Oh my God, Michael Caine's like insanely great.
I love it so much. Pothead Michael Caine, like who knew?
Who thought that using the "pull my finger" line would mean multiple things in a movie and be so effective. But Nicole, you're number 2.
My number 2. Okay, so I feel like I am well documented in loving this franchise, and particularly this film. I often say that this film is one of the greatest franchise films ever made, one of the best sequels of all time. And I also am so fascinated by this sort of dystopian sci-fi world that it is set in, one that we will be returning to later this year. So I am talking about Hunger Games: Catching Fire, which I think is a perfect movie. I think that this is so interesting. I think that the things that Suzanne Collins, as the author of the series, used this sort of dystopian sci-fi world to say about the nature of government are really interesting. I think that, as time has gone on since this series came out, the idea of like putting kids into an arena to fight to the death for entertainment purposes feels more and more like something that could actually happen. And I think that, while The Hunger Games, the first one, is a great film, I actually do think that Catching Fire is slightly better than it. Not just because it has Sam Claflin and Jenna Malone in some amazing roles. I don't think we talk enough about how great Jenna Malone is in this movie.
The true star of this movie.
Truly the star of the film. Like, not only there's that scene in the elevator, which is like incredible, insane.
Can't.
10 stars out of 5. But also the bit where they're, in the arena and she sort of goes off about the fact that, this government has taken everything from her. And I just think that the themes that it's playing with are so interesting. The twists that it takes are great. The production design of this, like that arena that they built for this movie, is one of my favorite production designs of any like film ever. Even the costuming in this is awesome. It has great performances from, like I said, Jenna Malone and Sam Claflin, from obviously Jennifer Lawrence. I think this is Josh Hutcherson's best movie of the Hunger Games franchise too. I love Donald Sutherland in these movies. I think he is perfect in this role. And I just think that it is sort of an underrated franchise film. Like, I think that it really is everything that a film like it, of its type should be. And it has made me, even more excited to sort of see Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes later this year. I'm really hoping that can sort of rise back up to the greatness of the first Hunger Games movie and Catching Fire, because, well, I like the Mockingjay movies. They're a little bit of a step down from this one, I think. But I really do also think that, like, this specific dystopian sci-fi world is one of the best ones that has been built in the past at least 50 years. I cannot say enough good things about Catching Fire.
Yeah, I actually think it's the best of the Hunger Games films. Any movie that decides to add Jeffrey Wright and Philip Seymour Hoffman into it is a winner in my book. I actually think Philip Seymour Hoffman is incredible in this movie. It's like,
I agree.
It's the kind of like stuff like you need an actor to like be able to carry that and just kind of elevate this sequel and the tension. And what I like about Catching Fire is that it really does deal with the trauma of the Jamie Lee Curtis of it all, of the first film. And it really does dive deeply into the stakes of this, of what is going on inside Katniss, and really then you get to see just how this truly terrible idea of the games themselves is now then afflicted because of her actions onto the previous winners, and the toll that takes. And how I love the sequence where they're talking to Stanley Tucci. Gotta love the Tooch.
Listen, it's one of my favorite Stanley Tucci performances. He's so good.
Where they're trying everything desperately on television but it's like the night before the games, and the sort of reveals and everything, and they're all lies, essentially, like when she's talking about like the baby and the marriage and all this different stuff and all that stuff. They're trying to do it to survive. And also I think too, it has one of the best, because I saw it in IMAX. And if you ever saw it in IMAX, the potential when the whole movie's in like regular frame, but when they go into the Hunger Games themselves,
race up into the arena,
the screen widens and you see it all in full frame. And I actually thought that's like, I get on Nolan a lot for switching back in aspect ratios all the time.
But
This is like one of those perfect
That
ones where you're like,
works.
where you built up for this and it's like, why am I watching this IMAX? It's so regular. And then they're like, oh shit. Okay, now I get you.
That is
It's
such
so
a great
smart by
sequence,
Francis
too,
Lawrence. Yeah.
because it comes out of like you're in one of the most traumatic moments of the movie with her watching in that glass tube as they're like beating Senna. And then so you're already a little disoriented, and then it does that, and it's like, oh, here we fucking go. Like, yeah. Great film.
That is a movie, well, that is a series, frankly, both the books and the movies, that has only seemed more prescient in its commentary as the years have gone by.
Yep.
Wild. So
yeah.
Dan, you're number 2?
I look, my number 1 and number 2, I'm slightly embarrassed because they're incredibly basic of me.
Here we go.
But look, some movies just they're formative, and they're formative for a reason. And look, in 1999,
there we go.
My mind was well and fully blown by The Matrix, and it has stayed that way ever since. And my love for The Matrix and for the whole franchise has only grown over the years, and with each successive Wachowski film. I think that the Matrix is the best of the franchise, by a lot. But the world building in this, I don't think the Wachowskis get nearly enough credit for how seamless it is, and for how well that opening sequence with Trinity teaches you all the rules of this world just by showing you what she's capable of. And it's, for all intents and purposes, like, dialogue free. Like, there is dialogue, but it doesn't mean anything. It tells you nothing. It's all done with visuals, and they are just some of the most incredible visual storytellers that we have ever had in the medium of cinema. And The Matrix, it blew everyone's mind in 1999. It's still blowing minds today. It holds up so well as a piece of, just whiz bang, rock'em sock'em, incredible, mind blowing action and effects work, but also the ideas that they're working with. It make it something that it feels interesting to return to again and again, because each time you notice different things, you pick up on different ideas, different motifs. And it is something that has also, like, for me, changed so much over the years as the Wachowskis have grown and become more themselves and shared that with us. For it to have so many layers, I don't think anyone realized that in 1999, and now it's impossible not to see it. And I love it. It keeps shape-shifting as the years go by. I absolutely love that. There are very few films that can do that, and The Matrix, to me, is very, very special.
Well, Dan, first crossover, because of the episode, because I have The Matrix at my number 2 as well. Perfect film, perfect film, perfect franchise. Not a bad movie of the 4. I love them all.
Not a bad one at all.
I think that first movie, as just an allegory for sci-fi themes and for conformity, is fascinating to look at. I think of it now as a trans allegory as well, or an allegory for the LGBTQ community and being different. I look at it also as just a pure action film and a pure hero's journey. And and I look at the world building within itself, the questions it asks. Lawrence Fishburne's performance was absolutely incredible as Morpheus. Keanu Reeves is incredible. Carrie-Anne Moss, Hugo Weaving as Smith. I think of
Joe Pantoliano.
Joey Pants.
Joey Pants.
2 weeks in a row coming up on this show. But I said it last week when Josh picked Bound, and I truly believe it, is that the Wachowskis just have this ability of being able to use what Jay and I describe as the power of love in these movies as a driving force that makes them so sincere, while also debuting these mind-blowing special effects and these mind-altering ideas that they are placing. I mean, like the scenes with the Oracle throughout this franchise are so you question
They're
yourself.
dense.
They're dense, and you end up questioning yourself. You're like, what the hell is going on here? And I think that The Matrix was so revolutionary. Its sequels have only gotten better as the years go on because of the fact that those practical effects, the CGI work, all of it, it's done with a form of sincerity behind it. And that's what the Wachowski sisters always have, is, like I mentioned last week, sincerity. They are some of the most sincere filmmakers you'll ever watch, because they give a shit about building characters that you fundamentally can't help but root for. And if you want to get it on 4K right now, I highly recommend it. That is one of the best 4K transfers I've ever seen. It's a 5 out of 5 film. I watch it at least once a year. My wife hates that I watch it every year because she's like not the biggest fan of it. But she actually sat down and watched all 4 with me a couple weeks ago, and she's like, okay, I get it now. I get it why you love this, because it actually, I think, has a lot more in relation to my number one film in terms of, for its generation, it was the think piece sci-fi film, and it was so influential on what every film would come before it. And I think what Nicole, you talked about in your review of The Creator, was absolutely right. We need more of these sci-fi films to come out to show that influence, to build it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the sheer number of iconic images from The Matrix is just like dumb. It's dumb how good this thing looks and how incredible the filmmaking is. Like it's just like that's the only word for it. It's just like stupid how good it looks. Like it makes me angry. But like the fact that for all it looks amazing and for how much of an incredible action movie it is, for the thing that always keeps me coming back, like you said, is those ideas and the philosophy behind it. That's what makes these movies interesting. That's what makes you keep coming back to them. And yeah, I just love it so much. And one of the best action sci-fi scores soundtracks of the 90s, 2000s.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's The Matrix. Number 1 time, Nicole Ackman.
Okay, I promised you we were going to talk about Star Wars. No. So my number 1 movie, because it is probably in my top 5 movies of all time, is Star Wars: The Force Awakens. As much beef as I have with J.J. Abrams because of The Rise of Skywalker, I still do love The Force Awakens more than like anything else. And I mean, I did go back and forth on whether I wanted to say The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi, because I think that both are incredible movies. I think that particularly, I mean, what Rian Johnson did with The Last Jedi is absolutely stunning. But The Force Awakens for me was the thing that really got me into Star Wars. I watched Star Wars when I was younger, but it wasn't until I saw Rey with a lightsaber in her hand that I really truly felt like there was a place for me in Star Wars. And like, it sounds over dramatic, but the fact that so much of The Force Awakens is about saying that Star Wars and the Force is not just for white boys, it is for, Black men and Latino men, and for women. And I think that that's so beautiful. I think that the interwoven stories of Finn and Poe and Rey are so special. I think that Adam Driver is incredible in this movie. Like, I'm sorry, there is nothing like that scene where he pulls the helmet off for the first time, and even Rey is like, oh, okay. But I think that what they're doing there is really interesting. I also have to give kudos to this movie, because casting Adam Driver as the child of um Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford was inspired. I think that the way that this really respects and loves the original Star Wars is really beautiful, while also making it something new and something for younger generations. I am obsessed with the way that people my age, and particularly people younger than me, have responded to this movie. Every time I go to Disney and I see a bunch of like little girls in Rey costumes, I literally will cry, because it's so special to me that, they have this kick-ass heroine to connect with in Star Wars, because that's really something that, as Leia's great and Padme are great, but it's the first time in the films we got to see a female Force user, and we got to see a woman wielding a lightsaber, and I think that's really special. And I also think that some of the themes that it's playing with here are really fascinating. I think that also, again, it's one of those movies that has gotten more relevant since it was made. The idea of a couple losing their son to the dark side because he has, been connected with this force on the opposite side of the political spectrum, I actually think is quite relevant. And, them not knowing how to reconnect with him and get him back. And thinking, he was a good kid. How did this happen? I think is all very interesting. And I really think it's a special movie. And I also think it has some of my favorite production and costume design of all time, particularly in a Star Wars film, but also just in a film in general. So it's my fave.
I love Force Awakens. I think though you hit the nail on the head why I love The Last Jedi more, because it explores why that corruption and why Kylo goes down that road, and done in the sort of Rashomon style, that Luke's betrayal, but his own internal stuff. And I know that a lot of the stupid fanboys out there got butthurt about that.
The only thing that holds
I don't care.
I back with The Last Jedi, and the reason I didn't pick it is because I don't like the way that the character of Finn is utilized in it. Finn is one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars, and I like the one criticism of The Last Jedi, the only criticism of it that I agree with, is that Finn really gets shoved to the side. And I do think that if Rian Johnson had been allowed to make the following movie, there would have been a lot of things that would have made more sense, and it would have been, this great arc for him. But because the last movie in this trilogy, I mean, if you ask me, it just doesn't exist. What happened? We never got one.
Last Jedi was the last one. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the last one. No, because the last one is utter garbage, and undoes what Rian Johnson was trying to do with The Last Jedi. It makes it very not satisfying. But actually, that is why they're very neck and neck for me, and that's the only thing that pushed The Force Awakens above for me.
Yeah, no, I actually prefer the storyline and where the themes, and I really love Rose and his connection with Finn, and it reminded me a lot of like what they did with Han and Leia in Empire, and sort of move them on their own mission, but it connects them back. And I think Finn still struggling with his identity is definitely something that you could also really look at it. And I think that if you read I know this is going to sound weird, but if you read the spec script that floated around online that Colin Trevorrow had actually wrote, it was actually far more interesting, and it dived more into, it was going to be the better film than what we got. And I think they cowered to fan service cowered to YouTube, Reddit expectations rather than making a film. And, but I think that there's the unholy compromise that Rian Johnson does in his film, and I think it still has Adam Driver's best performance in the last Jedi, and I think Daisy Ridley's pretty goddamn incredible. It had also,
not to mention Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill's incredible. It also is one of the top 3 scenes in all of Star Wars for me, when Yoda comes back and talks to Luke about about burning down the tests and letting this crazy fanaticism of being a Jedi die and be reborn in the form of Rey. Yes, Nicole, exactly. A shirtless Adam Driver
No.
scene. But I just think that there's the idea of also Rey being nobody, I think is incredible because that's what it all
Yeah.
should be. Like Broom Kid is still out there and he
Yes.
wants to be a damn Jedi and he's not connected to the fucking Skywalker lineage. You know, like it means that anyone can be a fan of Star Wars. And that's the thing I love about those first two movies in the reboot.
Yeah.
But I mean, clearly I love like Empire Strikes Back and as my favorite, but I'm sure Dan's just about to talk about that probably. But yeah, because I know Dan's got Star Wars on the mind. But I love that pick. I think that it's a great movie. Dan, I'm assuming your number one is a Star War. $5. Here's a
I
Star War.
I love that Nicole has as her number one the remix of my number one, which is Star Wars. Or as you know, it would be more specifically known, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It it it's not the movie that made me love movies, but it is one of them. It is one of the first times that I like felt that I saw a movie and really witnessed like the power of cinema. I remember I have this very like weirdly vivid memory of being like um young, like maybe 7 or 8, and being at like a family gathering that I like begged to be allowed to bring like a videotape to because I was so like I'm just going to be bored. Everyone's an adult, like I have no one to talk to about anything. There's no games, and somehow I managed to like sneakily put Star Wars into the VCR and watch it. And as it was playing, more and more people like came in the room and started watching, and before long it was this incredible collective experience where we were all sitting and watching and enjoying and getting invested in this story. It's one of the most simple but best examples of the hero's journey plot archetype. It the again, like these are visual effects that still hold up because so many of them are practical, and the performances and the characters are iconic, and they're iconic for a reason. And but even that, like amidst all the incredible, and I get the whole like Star Wars isn't really sci-fi, it's fantasy angle, like it's space wizards. I totally get that. But for all the like, magic and incredible, invigorating action on display, and the catty one-liners between Han and Leia, and the camaraderie and everything, my favorite thing in this movie is that scene where Luke is basically deciding to leave Tatooine, and he's just sitting there surveying the land, and you have that double sunset and that John Williams score. It may be my pick for the greatest film score ever written. It's another example of like perfect movie is perfect, but it's the impact that it has had on culture is so large that I feel like I don't need to say anything, because like if you know Star Wars, then you know why it's my number one. But yeah, I I love so many individual elements of it that speak to me on like some deep level, and it is a movie that I never grow tired of rewatching, although I wish I could watch it in its original form once again. George Lucas, like put down all of the editing tools. Like, do you understand how much money you would make if you just released the original cut of Star Wars on 4K? It's all anyone in the world wants.
I agree. I just want the original cuts. I don't want the new Disneyfied versions of them that have been.
I don't need
And then the Lucas
CGI
ones that have
Jabba
been
the
like
Hutt and
Yeah,
everything in that movie.
it's
Like I just don't know. Take it
no.
all out. Take it all out. It doesn't look right with the rest of the movie anyway. Part of the whole charm of this is that it was all practical and they made it and built it, and it's just some of the best production design and costume design in the history of cinema.
Yeah.
Ugh, it feels real and tactile, and then everything that they added with the visual effects looks horribly cheap and fake in a way that the rest of it doesn't.
Yeah, no. I love the original Star Wars, obviously. And my favorite's Empire Strikes Back. I just it always has been.
And I don't blame you. It is like, if I'm being
Like,
objective, it is the
perfect
better
sequel.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's also it's kind of crazy how like you go from that film to then Empire and you're just like, wow, it's almost like elevating itself. And I think when I was a kid, I watched Return of the Jedi a lot just because it had the most action in it. But
Yeah.
in my life, I watched Empire all the time, and that original trilogy is fantastic. But I'm not also like beholden to it to like the point where like new things can't be brought in. Though I do
Yeah.
wish this franchise would extend itself outside of the timeline and create something new and not be afraid to do it. That is the one thing I would say.
Completely agree.
Give me the High Republic
Yes.
stuff. Thank
Yes.
you.
No prequels, no nothing. Just do your own thing. Just continue to make new things like that Ryan Johnson trilogy that he wanted to make of new stuff.
Yes.
Get him to do it after he's done with all the
Give him all the money. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is sad because truly like the fan base has soured me on all like new Star Wars stories post the sequel trilogy, but my love for the originals has not changed and hasn't gone anywhere. But I do love that like the sequel trilogy is just, it's literally the original trilogy. Like in every way, those stories do the exact same thing for their
Yeah.
respective trilogies, and they're even the same in quality. If you ask me, the first one is great, the second one takes it up a notch, and the third one is meh.
It's there.
No,
It exists.
well, Return of the Jedi though,
Return of the Jedi, look,
far superior
far
film. But when you're comparing
superior.
it to the first two, I
yes.
do agree with you.
I am also a
Um,
prequels defender, but
There's one
Well,
film in the
let's not
there's
go
one
there.
yeah that's not yeah we don't have that much time
because I am an Obi-Wan as and
okay, yes,
Obi-Wan
you and his Obi-Wan
that is fine. Yes,
yeah
he
That
is
was-
the bright spot of that
Yes.
trilogy. Yes.
I still need to watch Andor. I heard Andor is really good.
Andor is amazing. I still need to
that's what
finish
I
it,
heard,
but
yeah.
it's really good.
Well, my number one is a very basic choice. I think you can't not have a top 5 sci-fi film without talking about maybe one of the greatest films of all time, and that
Yeah.
is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. I
Okay.
think when you talk about sci-fi films,
It's the granddaddy.
the number one thing about, and I know this is like Ryan's back-to-back weeks of making the number one pick, the most obvious choice with Citizen Kane in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I will refer back to my previous statements last week when I said, when something is as iconic and something is as influential as that is, much like The Matrix, but for modern cinema, The Matrix is that, but for everything that came before it, The Matrix only got to run because 2001: A Space Odyssey exists. It's so influential, mind you, that the movie that made $1.5 billion this year starts off its movie the same way that 2001: A Space Odyssey starts off in Barbie. It's as influential as you could ever be. And so I think that it's also a movie that really loves to just have continually questions about itself. There's no right answer really to any of it. And that's the beauty about sci-fi movies, is that there's multiple interpretations and multiple ways that you can examine a movie like 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's 2.5 hours. It's absolute thrill ride. I've never seen it in a theater. I really want to. I feel like you kind of have to see it. The 4K edition of this is fantastic. I know it's streaming on HBO Max. There's a ton of ways you can see it, but Kubrick's so deliberate and so patient throughout that entire film. And I think that ending is still, I have no idea what half of it means, but I kind of but I just love devouring pieces by people writing about what their interpretations is. And that's a lot like what Nolan tried to do with his sci-fi films, because like Interstellar is a massive homage to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and only he answers a lot more questions than Kubrick does. And I think that the more you peel back the layers of this onion, the more they realize that it's still just an onion, and you're gonna keep peeling it back for years and years to come. And that iconic score and just everything about it's still as mesmerizing as ever. And so it's one of the greatest films of all time, and I absolutely love it. Nicole, I know you have to get out of here real quick. But so Dan and I will wrap up and do honorable mentions. But
Perfect.
Do you want to just tell everybody where we can find you and all your work on the internet real quick?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can I like wrap up and throw a couple of honorable mentions?
Yeah, you can do some honorable mentions. Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. So
real quick, a few honorable mentions from me. The recent Denis Villeneuve Dune, which I adore. Jurassic Park, which I do think counts as sci-fi because the idea of bringing dinosaurs back is very sci-fi-y. The Martian.
So much fun.
Far be it from me to bring in a Matt Damon film.
I was going to say, this is a rarity.
Look, but it is the one where he uses his own poop to grow potatoes, so you know.
So he used himself? Okay.
I love the recent film Silent Night, which is like a nuclear world-ending thing. Also another Keira Knightley film. And also my controversial one last, Don't Worry Darling is great. It's not perfect, but there is a lot of good in it, and it is an interesting way of grappling with sort of sci-fi implications of modern issues with male toxicity.
He is totally a Last Jedi hater.
Right? Thank you. So those are my honorable
He's writing fanfic in the basement.
You can find me on the internet on Twitter, I'm still calling it that, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Nicole Ackman 16. And you can find my work at AwardsWatch and over at Culture Cabinet. Can I even speak today?
No.
Where Dan and our friend Lex and I do some writing about all things. I've been doing a lot of book reviews lately, so check them out.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. And Nicole, she again did the review for The Creator. Go ahead and read it if you've gone and seen it. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being on.
Thank you.
Go have fun. She has a fun Sunday planned. I don't think
I gotta go.
You want to tell everyone?
I gotta go learn how to play pickleball.
Yeah, she's going to play pickleball.
So. It's the game that's sweeping the nation.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Dan, do you want to give any final honorable mentions before we head out of here?
I do. I want to say that you are absolutely right that 2001 is one of the greatest films ever made. It's even better, dropping some drugs and watching that final sequence with Dark Side of the Moon playing. I think it's a rite of passage.
It really is, and but also just like the idea of like, what does it mean as a humanity? Do you take that movie as an optimistic look to what the sort of being alien thing is giving us, or do you see it as a negative, or do you see it as a positive? Is it a positive or negative experience? And I honestly think it's both. And I think it's however you're feeling within the mood, is how you're going to interpret the ending of that movie,
Yeah.
It's a Rorschach test. Yeah.
It is. The one that I like most struggled with leaving off my top 5 is actually The Fifth Element.
Oh yeah.
Which it was like one of my favorite movies for a long time, and I just haven't watched it in a while. Probably if I watched it again, I would put it back in place of Total Recall. but I love that movie. Talk about a movie that just really has a vision, a real vision of a different sci-fi world. I I love that movie. I love the production design. I think Bruce Willis is hilarious in it. I think Chris Tucker is iconic. Gary Oldman, what else needs to be said? Yeah, I love The Fifth Element. I also shout out to our silent era sci-fi. I love Metropolis. It's another one of the greatest films ever made. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely owe it to yourself to see it. It's incredible. You will not believe what they were able to do in like the 1920s. Insane. And A Trip to the Moon, which is almost just as much like fantasy as it is sci-fi, but that is such a delight, that movie, and I have watched it too many times to count. I think Minority Report is one of Steven Spielberg's best movies. I have said that ever since it came out, and I stand by it. And I did leave off Avatar and Dune, both of which I love. But the most modern one that I really felt bad leaving off is Annihilation.
Yeah. Oh,
I think that movie is brilliant. I think Natalie Portman is great. I thought it would be really hard for Alex Garland to top Ex Machina, and goddamn, he did. That is another movie that is just, the filmmaking is so incredible and the world building is so great, but it's really the ideas that it's dealing with that stick with you, and really, the morality of everything and how it works is, I love that movie a lot.
He's in a bit of a penalty box for me right now because well, I saw Men last year, so.
Oh, all right. Not the movie. Okay.
No, not the movie.
Yeah.
He is.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna write down a list. This is what I wrote down. Ad Astra, James Graves film.
Yeah.
Or as we all know it, Dad Astra.
Brad Pitt cries in space.
Tommy Lee Jones tells him, "Suck it up, Buttercup." High Life from Claire Denis.
Oh God.
Super horny and weird, and you gotta love it. Ex Machina, like you mentioned, I'm talking about Zemeckis Contact.
Yes, Contact.
AI, Solaris, whichever one you want to pick.
Yes.
Stalker, if we're going with
Stalker.
The Host from Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah. Good movie.
Starship Troopers. Under the Skin, The Man Who Fell from Earth.
Under the Skin.
Rise.
Yeah.
The Man Who Fell from Earth, Men in Black.
I love Men in Black so much. Iconic movie.
Iconic, just like 90 minutes in and out.
Yeah.
Funny as hell. Donnie Darko.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
Another Jake Gyllenhaal movie, Source Code.
Yeah,
if we're gonna go off Duncan Jones, then you go off of Moon.
Yeah, Moon. Sam Rockwell, fucking brilliant.
Planet of the Apes. You could pick the original. You could pick the
Rise,
reboots. Yeah, which I think are incredible. You mentioned Minority Report, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Pick a version of that, just not the new one. Snowpiercer.
Nice.
Mad Max, any of them?
Yeah,
they are
preferably Fury Road.
Preferably Fury Road. They are Thunderdome. Like.
I mean,
Fury Road.
Leave him off to the side.
I put him off to the side because I was like, there's such Fury Road's such an action spectacle, and yes, it is a dystopian future.
Yes,
that you could put it in there. You could put Mad Max on every fucking list if you want.
You really could.
We mentioned a lot about the Star Wars franchise, but there's also the Star Trek franchise, the multiple films that have come out of that over the decades. John Carpenter, Escape from New York, The Thing. Those are movies that you could consider. Gravity, we mentioned that already. I talked about when I talked about 2001, Interstellar, Inception from Christopher Nolan, also Tenet.
Inception was one where I was like, is it sci-fi or is it not? I don't know.
I mean, they're using technology
They
that
are
we don't.
yeah.
Yeah,
They do, yeah.
I mean,
To
they're
get into the
yeah,
dreams. Yeah.
yeah, and then those dream worlds are. Yeah, it's yeah. I that's why I put it on the list, Dan. I know I put Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I guess adjacent, but Alien. You had it on your list, but then Arrival. If I was just putting while that is my favorite
Arrival
Villeneuve
is so
film,
good. Yeah.
I think the more sci-fi film for me is Blade Runner 2049 and its connection with Blade Runner. So
yeah, sure.
that's what I did there. I think I mentioned Gravity.
Mhm.
Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
E.T. It's about an alien. Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow is so much fun.
It's so much fun. Wall-E, obviously. And we talked about Rian Johnson earlier, but Looper has one of
whose idea it was to cast Joseph Gordon-Levitt as young Bruce Willis, but it works.
It works, and
it works.
I'm gonna say this: Emily fucking Blunt
kills
She's
it.
incredible. Also, Jeff Daniels is really good in it.
Yes.
There's a lot of great performances in there. It has one of my favorite Bruce Willis moments where he just like shoots everybody up with a machine gun, and he's just like the angriest you've ever seen Bruce Willis in a movie. It's kind of great. It's a great movie. Yeah. So those are our top 5 sci-fi films with a lot of honorable mentions. So you guys all have enough films to go see this week, via rental or at a retro screening. Dan, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work? And I didn't get to ask Nicole this, but I wanted to ask you, you got a worst sci-fi movie you've ever seen? Because there are obviously this genre can go bad real quick.
Oh God, a worst sci-fi movie. That's hard.
I have one. I have one I've seen.
You?
Yeah. Battlefield Earth.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that and I raise you whatever
bad.
that one's terrible.
You know what? There's okay. This is such a mean question to ask me without any preparation.
I'm sorry. I like a surprise to end an episode.
Oh God! Another one that I completely forgot to even mention as one that I love: Galaxy Quest.
Oh, Galaxy Quest is really good.
Galaxy Quest.
I forgot to mention Gattaca. Yeah. Oh my God! I'm talking about
that. Okay. Okay. I will say it.
Okay.
I love you, David Lynch.
Oh, I know. Yes. Yes.
But your version of Dune is
terrible.
Pretty bad.
Pretty
and even you would admit that, I think.
He would admit it. Well, he wouldn't admit it because he's refused to talk about it.
Well, yeah, refused to talk about it.
And he doesn't consider it his movie, which is...
Well, exactly. Yeah. And that's why, frankly, it's so bad, because it ended up not being his movie.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's the one I would pick, I guess.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, and you can find me on the social media network formerly known as Twitter at Dancing Dan on Film. You can find me on Letterboxd and post at Dancing Dan.
You can find me on Twitter X, at Ryan, and Instagram and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at AwardsWatch.com. Please also listen to Director Watch. We've been getting a lot of great feedback about Director Watch, and everybody really loves it. This week's episode will be the last one of our Denis Villeneuve series. It'll be about Dune. We actually literally talked about Lynch's version a little bit in that episode. It was just me and Jay. We announced on that episode what is coming up in the next 2 series for what do you call it? For Director Watch. So in the front half of the episode, you will get the first director, and in the back half of the episode, when it's over, you'll get the second director. So we reveal both on that episode. I'm not going to do it here. I'm just going to tease you so that you go and listen to it.
It is worth a listen.
It's worth a listen. And I got to say, these are pretty great directors. Great filmography. So we'll be talking about over on that. So go listen to that. Go to iTunes, Spotify, give us 5-star reviews. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to see them. We'd love to read them. So if you give us 5 stars, we'll read it on the show. As well as also go to awardswatch.com, sign up for the newsletters. There's going to be a lot of great stuff that's been coming our way. All of our festival coverage has been over there, podcasts, all the different stuff. Please go and sign up for that. It's simple. Just go to awardswatch.com, sign up. You get the email twice a week. Eric sends it out. He's very proud of it. I'm very proud of him doing it. So next week on the show, Dan, do you know what we're doing next week? I have no idea what we're doing next week on this show. I never know what anything. Oh, yes, I know. We're doing another retrospective. We're doing an Oscar retrospective. We're not going that far back. We're going back 5 years. 5 years to everyone on Twitter's favorite time, 2018. We're going to talk about the 2018 Oscars. That's what we're going to do next week. And hopefully that means I get a chance to watch some rewatches of some really great films from just 5 years ago. And we'll get to talk about that. And really, that's when most of us on this team got to meet for the first time. So it'll be a little trip down memory lane next week on the Awards Watch podcast. But thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.